Hello? Okay, so do I just got it? Okay. So thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend. I know at least a handful of you, you've got projects due, you've got things that need to get done, and you're like, oh my gosh. By show of hands, how many people are in their first year of undergrad? Perfect. Second year of undergrad? Third or fourth? Okay. How many people are graduating in May? How many people know what they want to do when they walk out the door? Wow, gosh. Oh my gosh. You are so ahead of the curve. Because when I was in undergrad back a few years ago, like 5, I had no clue what I wanted to do. When I graduated from high school, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be a doctor. Of course, I want to help people. So I went to Seton Hall, I majored in biology. I was actually a part of a program called EOP, which stood for Educational Opportunity Program. And I was in a special part of EOP, and at that time it was more of a pilot program, and it focused specifically on anyone who wanted to be a science major. So if you heard of the Three Doctors, you've seen their book, like they've gone around, they do programs. They were a year ahead of me. That's the program I was in. Awesome, turned out wonderful people. Not that I'm biased. So anyway, so now here I go, wanted to be pre-med. That's all I knew you could do with a biology degree. And I was like, then I saw a posting, because I read everything, and it was like, hey, do you want to do this internship? And it gave you an opportunity to do 2 things. 1, shadow a doctor for 8 weeks, and then 2, work in a lab for 8 weeks. And I was like, yes, and I did it. Hated it. Got into shadowed the doctor, was like, oh, this is exciting. And then she saw a patient, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then she told the patient to take his medicine, and I'm like, I want to do this. And then, okay, the next week the patient comes back. Same patient presents. Did you take your medicine? No. Did you do what you saw? No. I was like, I would probably hit that patient. So obviously, I do not have the bedside manner to be a doctor. So what else can I do? So I go over to the research lab. And at that time, and I'm going to ask you to forgive me, literally, because if you feel some kind of way about this, I went to do pathology research at UMDNJ. It was a part of the program. And it was amazing, literally, life-changing. I had an opportunity to do sickle cell research on stem cells, live human cells, treated with different chemotherapies, and try and change the sickle form from its sickle shape into more of what you look as a normal animal shape, and see if that would then change the outcome. But of course, it was very preclinical, which we'll talk about, so we had to do it in stem cells. Like first we had to make a sickle, we had to do all this stuff. And I'm like, this is great for the first 6 weeks. And then I was in the lab, and I was pipetting again and again. And I'm like, where are the people at? And I was like, oh my gosh, how on earth can I marry these two? Like, I'm a science major. You can see how shy and quiet I am. You know I don't want to talk to anybody based on how much I talked to you guys in the beginning. So I've got this personality, and I love research, and now you want to stick me in a lab in a basement, and I'm going to pipette for what? Oh, no, 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 no. So at that point, I was like, great. Career day, senior year. I went up to the job thing, and I said, hey, here's my personality. Here's what I don't want to do. What you got for me? Because I have student loans, and I need money. That's all I could think about. Job, money, gotta survive. And I got a job as a quality associate at a very small company called Metarex. Had no clue what they did, didn't care, knew they paid me, and it was more than I had ever made. $9 an hour. Woohoo! So with that opportunity, I had a chance to now start looking at manufacturing sites. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to be stuck in a lab? Okay, so what are you gonna do with this manufacturing site? Let me pay attention. What do you make? Biotherapy, what does that mean? They were way ahead of their time. Stocks were only $3, they're about $9 now. I think they tanked, but that's a different story. The point is that I seized an opportunity and started to learn and started to pick up nuggets of who am I, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and how can I get better at what I'm going to do next. Since it was a small company, I also delved in the clinical world as well. And that was where I started to shine and flourish, because after Metarex, I became what's called a clinical research associate at Quintiles. And at Quintiles, I was able to use my knowledge and my love and my passion of getting drugs on the market. And the one thing I always say is, anything I put on the market, anything that I've touched, it needs to be able to go into my grandmother. And if it can't, if it's not effective, it's not made well, if it's anything, if it has too many side effects, I don't want to be involved. So, and I had a chance to really impact that. So worked at Quintiles for a couple years, started to rise up, and then in there I got married, had, I don't know how many kids, I've got 5, so there were some kids born, I don't know how many at that point. And then I was just like, I can't take this anymore. And I said, bye-bye. It's like, I don't feel whole, I'm not giving back, I don't know why I'm here. I'm gonna go teach, because like I am here today, my passion is still people. I wanna make sure that the opportunities that I had as a woman in East Orange, on Norwood Street, off of South Orange Avenue, in the hood, in the gutter, where the rats and the roaches ran across your feet daily, where you had to jump over the crack bottles and truck all the way up to Montclair to go to school. I wanted that kid to know, you see this face? I don't want any excuse as to why you can't do it. If you couldn't study in 2 hours and make it, then you better study for 6, not 4, 6. And when you walk out my door, you will be as competent as everyone else. So I went to start teaching. Taught in Plainfield for 4 years. Awesome, 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 awesome. And I'm still in touch with many of those students. I'm proud to say 2 of them, again, Plainfield, gang signs on arm, you know, whatever else they were dealing with at the time. One of them is in the Air Force. He's very high in terms of where he is right now. So proud of him. He was what I call one of my special kids, if you will. 2 of them are nurses. One of them is, well, she was doing drug sales for a while, so she got a degree in the sciences, and she's doing drug sales, but now she's like making more money than I'll ever see. And I'm like, ugh. How much are your stocks trading for? And many of them went on. One of my worst students is like a nurse's, she's a CNA, and this is the girl who they said would not be anything. So very proud of my time there. But said, you know what, this isn't for me. It really isn't. I saw one of my commercials, one of the drugs that I worked on had now gone commercial. And I was like, that itch is still there. It's still there. You know it. It's in your blood. You can't help it. You're drawn to it. It's like a magnet. So I went out, got a job, went to see Johnson & Johnson, got back into clinical research, worked on several more drugs. Very proud of my work there as well. Went to Catalent, got caught in a layoff. And this is the one thing. You will get laid off in your career. But if I loop back to what I said, know who you are, know what you want, know your strengths, your weaknesses, take advantages of opportunities. you will start to see where the next opportunity will lead you. And don't stay in one little hole. At J&J, I worked in phase 1. And that means I was that person. Again, I've got a couple of strengths. I'm very good technically, and I'm also good with people, and I can understand doctors. And if there's one thing I've learned is an MD and a PhD do not talk to each other. The PhD is 100% consumed with what's going into this drug. Can I manufacture it? Can we remanufacture it? Can I get it on the market? How does it taste? How does it feel? The doctor, I won't say is less concerned, but he's like, I've got this patient is here. Will he or she be compliant? Why did they make one red and pink? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna titrate them up or down. They've made one red and pink, and it's going to a grandma. Do you think grandma can tell the difference between red and pink? Maybe she will, maybe she won't. So at J&J, one of the things that I did was focus on phase 1. When you're starting to make those key decisions, is it gonna be a capsule? Is it gonna be a tablet? Is it gonna be square, rectangular? How are we gonna tell the difference between one and the other? How do we know it's blue? How do we know it's salmon color? Is salmon color a good color? Do we want, what's in salmon? Are we gonna take this from the US to other markets? Started learning there. Took that knowledge to Catalent. Again, after J&J, you'll see this as a common theme. Oh my gosh, I can't take this anymore. Life is too hard. So I went for an interview, and it was like 2 steps down. And went to the interview, and they were like, you do know what you're interviewing for? I was like, oh yes, that's the job I want. I just want to shuffle papers from here to there. They were like, that's not the job we're giving you. So I got to be at the table. Let me say that again. This girl from East Orange, South Orange Ave, who had to track how many towns over, got a seat at the table when they started saying, how are we going to do this? What do we need to think about? What are the key critical parameters? Where are we going to make this drug? How are we going to market it? Who's our target audience? And I got to sit at the table at Catalent. My boss left, I went with her, went to a generics company, and that's where I am now, Amerigen Pharmaceuticals. Why? Because I don't think you shouldn't have access to drugs. I just don't think that. I think in this day and age, you should be able to have a choice. You can either pay $30,000 for a pill or $8,000 or some other numbers that are more palatable. But at the end of the day, we should have, if we are going to have generics, it needs to be quality. Because if I can't put it in my grandmother, I don't want to be bothered. So, how do you get there? How do you start thinking about what happens? Well, I'm going to tell you most of where I lie is in this realm. The preclinical stuff, I'm getting more and more involved in, and that's in identifying what compounds do we want to work on. Not only does it have to be something that's scientifically sound, meaning I need to look at all my sites and make sure that they can do it, right? Because it doesn't make sense for me. It's like having a great idea and then saying, hey, you know what? Can you go make this drug for me tomorrow? You're going to look at me like, no, it's not going to happen. Do we have the capability at any of our sites to do it? If we do, is there a market for it? If we do, can we make it quality? Or do we have to put such cheap products in it that it's no longer no, not going to do that either. So I'm getting more into that early preclinical phase. In drug development, once you have your idea, you come up typically with 3 to 5 prototypes, or 3 to 5 leading prototypes. You've probably done a lot of lab work before where you have done countless prototypes. I know we have. But you've got 3 to 5 leading prototypes. Once you identify your 3 to 5 leading prototypes, you tend to then think about, especially as a generic, what does the brand look like? And I will tell you the truth. Sometimes We are so good that we're like, is this really a generic, or do we want to brand this ourselves? And there are a whole bunch of other reasons why we can or can't. But starts to, what's the best way to get this molecule into a person and have it available in their body or bioavailability as quickly as possible, or as long as it should be? Is this going to be go into their body and they have to take it once a day? And if they have to take it once a day, by the end of the day, are they still going to have whatever in their body so it's still effective? So that's kind of a lot of what we do in phase 1. Get your leading prototypes, define how you're going to get it into the body. Once you do that, you make up what's called small scale batches. So we've got small equipment that you would see like in a commercial line, right? But it's smaller, and the scientists will usually go in and they'll make a bunch of tablets and pills, and then we'll put it on what's called stability at that point. Because we can't put it into a human yet, we need to make sure that if this is the best route, and if I put it under extreme cold or extreme harsh, extreme humidity, extreme conditions that people, okay, like you ever read, how many people have actually read the directions on medicine? Okay, how many people read the directions where it says, keep in a cool, dry place? How many people keep medicine in their medicine cabinet, in the bathroom? Is that a cool, dry place? So that's okay. We put it under extremes. And if we put it under extremes, what's going to happen? We look at, is it going, and as a generic, I have to look at a couple of things. Number one, if I tell you it has 250 milligrams of drug in it, I need to make sure that when it's tested, it has 250 milligrams of drug coming out. I need to make sure that when it dissolves, I have to imitate the gut, right? So different pH conditions. When it goes into the gut under different parts of the gut, right? So as it goes into the gut under different pH conditions, will it still break down the same way as your parent drug or your reference drug is breaking down? I've got to make sure, and this is probably one of the key things, is that when it does break down, that there isn't anything else funky coming out. So what do I mean by that? There aren't any, and every drug has to do this, not just generics, but what's the impurity profile? So when you take a drug, it's gonna, remember I put a whole bunch of stuff in, that stuff has to get broken down in your stomach. The key component has to then go and do what it needs to do, and everything else has got to go somewhere. That key component also may get broken down, depending on the drug. And if it does, what's coming out of it? And is it dangerous to you? If it's not, then I'm okay. So I'm looking at the impurity profile, the dissolution rate, how it breaks down, making sure if it's 250 in, 250 out. What do you do after that? So prototypes, safe, not safe. Usually by that time, you can get rid of at least, if you have 5 leading prototypes, you can get rid of at least 2 of them very quickly, because you're going to see there's going to be some that are better than others. And remember I talked about that color? We test different colors. What does it look like if I expose it to the bathroom temperature? You know, is it still going to be salmon? If it's not, you know, what does that mean? Is somebody going to be non-compliant? And then can they overdose and harm themselves, right? So I've knocked off 2. Now that brings me to where I am. So I've got 3. Now what do I need to do? Usually at this point, I can take it into a human. So now I need to know, because I'm a generic, now I've got some lab tests that say it's safe. I've got some lab data that says this is what I think it's doing. I've got some lab data that says, okay, I take it, put it into a human being. Once it goes into a human, we actually have volunteers. It's called a phase 1 study. People volunteer to do this. We administer the drug, our product, and it's over a series of several weeks. But in essence, what happens, one person will take our product or products, they will take the reference product, and then we will test their blood. And it's horrible because we're pulling samples sometimes every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every hour. Depending on the life of the drug, we can take samples out to 72, 48, 140 hours, just depends on what drug we're testing. So we take that, we analyze it, and then we go, aha, this is the one we're taking forward. And then I have to take it to my regulatory person and say, I've got this drug, here's the profile, can you defend this in front of the FDA? What else do you need me to do in order to make sure that when you take that packet to the FDA will say approved as quickly as possible? Because every day that I'm still a business person, every day that I get that drug on the market, number one, somebody's getting a cheaper drug. Number two, it's about $1 million a day. Then we start working on it. We'll take it, we'll start scaling it up. Remember, right now we've just done some lab scale stuff. We'll take it out to the commercial floor. That's interesting. One would think that a mixer, you know, the thing that just like your blender. Anybody have like a KitchenAid or blender, anything? Like, just think of that, but much bigger, fancier, more tools, is what you'll see on a pharmaceutical floor. And usually it takes several chances to get there in order to go from that lab scale batch, because you'll find that you're not matching what you did in the lab for any number of reasons. Once you do that, you can then package it. We've got what's called long-term stability. So remember, I've done a short study so far. The longer I can get this, keep this product on the market, the better off the company is, the better off you are. So we do a long-term stability study, we do more inhuman studies, put a package together, send it to the FDA, and then the FDA comes back and they rip our product apart and say, no, we don't like it. And that's where we start learning more and more. Oops. How long does this take? When I was on the branded side, it usually took, and most people are going, why is a drug so expensive? That $30,000, because it's a lot of work. If you came out with 5 prototypes, you had a lot more going in. I'm going to switch my slides very quickly. What most people don't see is this. Your potential pipeline, or what you're doing in the lab, is a lot of this. With all of that, you're probably coming out with 1 drug. You've probably spent very easily, over $250 million, because you've had to test it in a lot of people. You've had to make sure it was effective. If I say that this is going to cure your headache, I've got to statistically show that your headache is reduced from like, ugh, to I can walk. I've got to have validated tests. I've got to have experts come in. I've got to have toxicologists come in. By the time we get there, the FDA is torn it apart and we may have 1 drug. How long does it take? On the branded side, typically 10 to 15 years, if you're lucky. On the generic side, they're getting a little bit faster, but it can take 5. Any questions so far? It is less money on the generic side. The reason why it's less money on the generic side is we, on the generic side, have to demonstrate equivalency, meaning I am equivalent to what the brand has said. So I have got to have that dissolution profile at the same rate. I've got to show that 250 in is 250 out. And I've got to show that in a person, it breaks down at a certain rate the same way that the branded drug does. And that is not easy, especially for a complex molecule, So that's a very, very interesting question. And there's just so much tied into that. The simple answer is it depends on the patent. So, and how many patents. Ironically, one of my last jobs at J&J was extending patent life. So we would do things like we would come out and it would say, this drug will, let me think of one. This drug is intended for use in people 18 or over and will reduce your arthritis pain by 75%, right? Then, if you pay attention to commercials, you may see that same drug, but you'll see a different slant. This drug is intended for people ages 13 to 18 only, and it will help cure your acne. What? So we've found a way to extend that patent. So how long? Depends on the patent, depends on how hard that generic company is willing to fight. It depends on how many patents they've put on, because how many bogus patents, how many real patents. They will come out with like 30 patents. You go to court, you try and start fighting each one of them. Then you settle on, here's what you can do in terms of your launch date. That has to be true, because the FDA will shred your drug apart if it doesn't. A bogus patent will be something like that active ingredient, right? They'll say, well, when my active ingredient breaks down, it only has these two compounds that break apart and nothing else. And we can go, oh, no, you've got this intermediate. And based on that intermediate, I was able to then add these components to it. I now have a different active ingredient. I've now put that into your identical formulation, and now my drug is superior, or equal, whichever. So, it really depends. Sometimes they'll have, I've seen some really weird, I'm trying to think of the weirdest patent I've seen. That's probably a more common one, but they can have some really foolish patents out there as well.
I've never had a problem with generics, but I've had doctors say, like, only buy the major. Like, how do you feel about that as a company?
So generics they've had a very bad reputation for a long time. And to be completely transparent, and this is just how the FDA has worked, right? So the FDA has taken or took extreme regulations on the pharmaceutical industry. Check. Everybody knows that. The next industry they went after, if you will, or started to clean up and got rid of what I call the bad actors, right? People who really they were there to make a profit, right? So then they started cleaning up the device companies, making sure that they were in compliance. So, for example, if you have an asthma drug and you pump it, and it has that little metered dose on it, and it says it delivered 30 parts per million, that really 30 parts per million came out. Sometimes they'd be like, that was about, like, ain't 15 about 30? If you're around, like, no, and those companies got shut down. So that was the next one they went in, and then they came in after generics. And they have done an amazing job in terms of cleaning up the generics industry, to the extent that the FDA now says, if you've got a submission out there, an application that you can't respond, remember I said they rip it up, they literally come back and they will ask you everything about your packaging component, how you sealed it, anything they can think of that you didn't address, they're going to ask you. If you can't answer their questions, get your application out of here. Otherwise, we're going to start charging you. So people have started taking some of those applications back. And now they have stricter things in place to make sure that we are what we really say we are and what we're doing. Oh my gosh. So right now, I oversee 27 active projects, 27 active projects, 27 active projects. 2 launched in 2016 and early 2017. I'm doing 3 validations between now and the end of the year, and a validation is just demonstrating that you can actually make this drug at a large scale. Because remember, I was like, it's a lot of oops, right? Like, and it really is a lot of oops. And then people change, and sometimes one person, like, it's like having your grandma make your favorite meal, and then your mom try. Thanks, mom. So people change. So we have to go through what's a validation process, and that means we've got to make the drug 3 times at the same strength and then put it up on stability. So I've got 3 of those going on. I've got 5 drugs that I'm defending right now with the FDA. In fact, I was just in Tennessee because the site in Tennessee wasn't doing what they're supposed to do. And it always awes me and humbles me when I have to go to a site and tell them, like, dudes, clean up your act. Like, really, come on. So I've got 5 of those. And the reason why I brought that up is because they just weren't, they're supposed to help us. Because, like, I physically don't make drugs anymore. I'm not in the lab anymore. So, like, if I go to a site, I'm in the lab, but I'm not day to day in the lab. That's not my job. So they got to help us, and they weren't. So I've got 5 of those, and then I've got the rest that are in development. The other 10, how I slipped to the 37, are where we are in that early state of trying to identify our next round. Because once I start validation, I know I'm dead. Like, I've got a certain amount of life that I'm going to get out of that, and I've got to get my next wave in. Otherwise, I got to fire people. So it's a lot of work. Any more questions? When I first started, so I've got the best job in the world. I do want to say that, because I am responsible for everything and I do absolutely nothing. But at the same time, if it doesn't go right, I literally have my CEO in my, I mean, like, we were in a meeting like 2 weeks ago, and we were going at it. And so he's got a potty mouth, I've got a potty mouth. It was kind of like a potty mouth session going on. So from that respect, I like it. But one of the things I talked about and touched on is, in order to get all of these drugs made, I've got to look across the globe. I've got to look and make sure that my sites can actually do this. Do you have the competency, or am I going to be up all night? Like, we interviewed someone 3 months ago, and I said to her, so what are you going to do when you get a call at 2:54 a.m. and they tell you that they took your active ingredient that cost the company $267,000, and they were getting ready to introduce it into the system, and they were like, oops, it fell on the floor. What are you going to do? And she looked. That could never happen. I was like, okay. We hired her, though. And now that she's with us, she's like, and she's getting some of those calls. She was like, you weren't joking? No, I was not joking. So do I like it? Not all days, and I want to be completely transparent. We are in a global society. So I manufacture in India. I manufacture in Canada. I manufacture in New Jersey. In fact, I was at my site in New Jersey today. I manufacture in Florida, Tennessee, California, China, and we're looking at another site in China and one in Germany. So it can be around the clock, and we are looking at, we're a small company. We've done a lot with few resources, and I think that's mostly because we're we're at the top of our game, right? We're at that age where we're still hungry, we still got that drive, we're still willing to stay up all night. We know what we're doing, but at the same time, we're sitting here like, all right, so how do we get the next generation in? And we were talking about, do we start hiring? Who are we hiring? Like, you can't, I hope no, Don't ever repeat this if you go to a pharmaceutical company. But I know when I was at J&J, I did not work as hard as I did when I worked at Catalent or as I'm working now. So the joke is the big pharma companies don't really work that hard. So it's like when you get them in, they're like, well, I got here at 9:30 because it was traffic. I've got my lunch break and I've got to take Susie to the dentist, so I'll be gone for 2 hours. And I've got a hard stop at 4:45. So we can't have that person, even though they have the experience. And then it's, do we start getting interns? And then what does that look like? And that's kind of where the company is. So that's that. Do I love it? Absolutely. Would I do anything else? 9 days out of 10, the answer is no. But if I got a call at 2:54 in the morning, it's probably going to be, I'm going on LinkedIn. And my boss knows that I say that. I say that publicly. Any more questions? I think that is the best question. And if I tell anyone anything, take a free intern. I don't care what internship you get. If they pay you $1, take it, because it will start to help you. It's going to do a couple things. You're going to see what you want, what you like, what you don't. Is it cracked up to what you think it really is? And then more importantly, it's going to show you so many different aspects. So I'm a project manager. I have teams. Remember, I'm responsible for everything. I don't do anything. So I've got a whole team behind me. I've got a person who only focuses on formulation. So I can just talk to him for hours and we start going through different possibilities, right? Like maybe that's your interest, but you wouldn't know that if you never interned, right? And maybe you don't like that. Maybe you really want to be in the lab, which, oh my gosh, Tennessee, we need people in the labs so desperately. Maybe you don't mind being in the lab for 12 hours, 18 hours, or, working 4 hours one day. Maybe that's your thing. Maybe, because we have to also, there's a whole lot of development work. Maybe you've got that creative mind that you can say, okay, this is how we can manipulate this and make it work. Maybe that's your thing. Maybe you're the person on the floor who's actually, remember, you go up to the large scale and it's like the, mama versus, okay? So maybe that's your thing. But I firmly believe in interning, do you get to actually live it and see what that person's life is like. So would I have been, I think I would have left, completely honest. I did not, and I did not get into medical school. I thank God I did not get into medical school every day. But at that point, if I had not done the internship, I wouldn't have known what to do next. What you want to ask? Yeah. You better ask a question. I cute. No, I'm fine, thank you. See, my teaching days are coming out. So that is my presentation for today. I am leaving my contact information. That is my real cell phone number that I answer. I've got two. I'll answer one of them. Somebody in this room could tell you that. I know she's like, wait a minute, I don't even have that number. And that is my real email address, but I will tell you text messages, or I'm old-fashioned, pick up the phone and call. Anything else? Yes. So I had, and I will just say this, and I encourage everyone to fail. The one thing I've learned about successful people, and the more times I speak to people who have made it higher and higher and higher, is we're not afraid to fail. Like, I will walk up to anyone example, like an hour ago, maybe 2, I don't know. I landed on campus. I haven't been here in 20 something, 5 years. My bad. It looked all kinds of different, and somebody was trying to get me to the tech building, and I'm trying to walk around, didn't know. And so they're trying to I was just like, excuse me, where the tech building at? So in terms of how did I get to, I'll take it as a not what led me there, it was a series of failures. So after I left undergrad, after I didn't get into medical school, after I realized I was not going to be a nurse either, so like I get it. And then I thought about physician's assistant, and I was like, yeah, still got it. No, not me. Then I was like, all right, I'm going to do this lab thing. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll do biochemistry. So then I registered for my master's at another school that wasn't Seton Hall. And I started biochemistry, but I had all them kids. So that didn't work. And then I was like, well, you know, maybe I can do epidemiology because that really is my kind of like thing. And that didn't work. I was just like, yeah, this is way too boring for me. So after a series of failures, but ultimately led to greater knowledge, it gave me the power to sit at that table and be able to talk to that pharmacist, be able to talk to that PhD, be able to talk to that MD, and know and stand my ground. So when we're arguing over, because it's not pretty, right? Like we have some real arguments over what that formulation should look like. I had took a number of classes, even though I didn't finish my master's in those programs for any number of reasons. It did give me the knowledge. And then when I said, okay, I'm getting older, I'm retiring young, I'm getting rid of my kids, what can I do that comes naturally? What's my strength? And I said, okay, and I think I went back to school if I graduated in 12, I started 2 years before that, so 2010. And I had to do it online. And at that time, online wasn't like glorified. And I was like, oh, I am Catherine Nelson. I do not go to online schools. Are you kidding me? I have a degree from Seton Hall, and I've done this and that. And I finally was just like, you know what? If I want to advance my career and I want to be in a boardroom, then I need to do what I need to do. And I need to make some hard decisions about what fits my lifestyle. And I went online, got my MBA from Walden, and it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. All right.
Catherine, thank you so much for coming. And don't forget to give me what I asked for earlier.
Yes.
And I thank you guys for participating in this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Best of luck. If you need any information, advice, failures, success stories, as you can see, I'm 100% transparent. Have a good day and best of luck to all of you.